I've lived stories that have proved your faithfulness. I've seen miracles my mind can't comprehend. And there is beauty in what I can't understand. Jesus, it's you. Jesus, it's you.
Hello, DCC. Listen, I've already made a prediction this morning, and it's come true. I told the 9:30 crowd, I said, what amazes me is even though you're up earlier, you're all always louder and more engaged than the second group. Hello, DCC. That's more like it. You've had more sleep. All right. That's the way I like it. Awesome. Hey, glad to be here today. I'm excited. Today is Palm Sunday. And the reason there is a Palm Sunday is because of this, the miracles of Jesus. That's all the reason that Palm Sunday come about. So Palm Sunday is traditionally like the first day of Easter week, where we kick off Easter. And it kind of leads through the week of what we go through up to where Jesus had the Last Supper with his disciples, to where he was betrayed, to where he was crucified, and ultimately a week later, the resurrection, the ultimate miracle that we're going to celebrate next week. But Palm Sunday occurred because Jesus had spent the past 3 years doing miracles. He went around teaching and preaching, and everywhere he was teaching and preaching, he was also doing miracles. He was healing people. He was healing the sick. He was removing demons. All kinds of different people, raising people from the dead. And right before Palm Sunday, just probably a couple weeks before, he had raised Lazarus from the dead. And this was a big deal because Lazarus was a well-known, probably influential guy, and everybody in Jerusalem had heard about this. Plus, this was also the beginning of the Passover festival, so Jerusalem was packed. Everybody from the surrounding country was in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. So all these people in town, some of them had heard Jesus. Everybody had heard about Jesus. So when they heard Jesus was rolling into town, everybody gathered and had a really big parade for Jesus coming into town. Kind of like when a team wins a national championship or a Super Bowl, everybody from the country had come in. We heard Jesus is rolling in. They all gathered, lined the sidewalks, were crowding each other to see him rolling in. And what they would do, especially those that really followed Jesus, started throwing their jackets down on the road for him and the donkey he's riding on to walk across. And if you didn't have a jacket, you grabbed big old leaves, and it's kind of like making a red carpet. And palm leaves covered a whole lot of area. So that's where we get Palm Sunday, because they made the way for Jesus to walk in. So, Palm Sunday, as interesting as it was, that so many people were excited to see Jesus, hear Jesus, hopefully to see a miracle from Jesus. Not everybody felt the same way. Some people in the crowd were skeptical. Some people in the crowd really thought he was the Messiah, and that's the people who were throwing their jackets and stuff and letting him walking on. Some people wanted him dead. Yeah. All kinds of different responses to this. Now, why would people want Jesus dead? Now, if you can do a miracle, you have a lot of power. Because it takes extreme power, supernatural power, to pull off a miracle. The definition of a miracle is when something surprisingly in a good way occurs that cannot be explained by nature or does not follow the laws of science, and it's attributed to the divine, which is God. We can't explain it. It shouldn't happen, but it happened, so God did it. That's what a miracle is. if you can do miracles, you have a lot of power. And here's the thing about power. He who has power has control. We know that. That's the way the world works. It's about power and control. Politicians, governments, local places, businesses, sometimes even in your own family there's a power thing and a control thing. And I'm just going to go ahead and ask right now for you to be honest. How many of you like to be in control? Me and about 20 other honest people in here. Everybody that raised their hand, let's go ahead and be proud and raise our hands high. Because if you are not raising your hand, it's about you being in control. Because I'm not going to let some preacher trick me into raising my hand. I'm staying in control. Right? We're all about power and control to some extent. But when Jesus had miraculous power, God power, those who thought they were in control were threatened. It's like, hey, we like him when everything he's doing good, but when it comes to the point where his power is going to cost us control, we don't like him because I want to be in control. Now, what would this matter to us? I'm going to be honest. We are Appalachian Americans living in eastern Kentucky, the 606. We are some of the most strong-willed, self-reliable people there are. And we're proud of that, correct? Yeah. During the floods, what do we see? Hashtag East Kentucky strong, Appalachian strong, 606 strong. Because if you're going to make it in our geography, you have to be pretty self-reliant and to be able to do things under your own power. Which is fine, so you can't. We like to be in control and we like to do things under our power. And as a very self-reliant, do things under our own power people, sometimes we get really pig-headed. And even though there's a better power available, we're just going to do it on our own, and if that doesn't work out, so be it. And sometimes we do that when it comes to Jesus, because I'm going to do it on my own. If he don't do it the way I want to do it, tough. I'm not going to rely on him to do it. I'm just going to do it my way, let the chips fall where they may. Aren't you proud to be in the 606? We are. At times it comes in good, but also at times it's very detrimental to our relationship with Jesus. So, here's the thing. We do not possess enough power, ultimately. There will be a time in your life when you cannot control the situation, you cannot influence the situation, you don't have the power to change anything. Maybe it's a incurable diagnosis. What do? What if someone close to you dies? What do? What if someone that you extremely trusted betrays you? What do? Things that are out of your control. Things you have no power to. It'll be in Luke chapter 8. Before I dive into this specific miracle, I want to talk about Luke for a second. Luke is one of my favorite gospels. So we know the Bible is Old Testament and the New Testament. Old Testament's everything before Jesus. New Testament, first 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the Gospels about Jesus. Then everything after that is the church after Jesus. Luke is my favorite of the Gospels. The 4 Gospels are all different stories about Jesus' life from 4 different perspectives from different people. And I like Luke because he's the only one that's not Jewish. So that relates to me and to probably almost everybody in here because we're not Jewish. Now, the other thing I like about Luke is he's a physician. So he is very scientific about how he approaches this. So him and his people are hearing about Jesus, all these miracles, and think, if this is true, we need to get on board. But they're not just going to trust somebody and fall in line. They're going to check it out. So Luke's job is to approach this like a science project, like writing a thesis, to make sure all these stories about Jesus are true. So he goes and interviews these people that lived with Jesus, that ran with Jesus. He interviews Mary, supposedly. And he tells us about Jesus. And during his book, it's 24 chapters, and it lists over 30 miracles. And Luke not only feels like it's true, he's influenced enough to become a Christian, and he continues following the church, and he writes the book we know as Acts, which is the history of the first church. But in his book, he's writing about all these miracles, and he lists over 13 times that people are healed. Sometimes it's one person was healed. Sometimes it was everybody who came to him was healed. As he went and preached and taught, groups came to him, and sometimes just hordes of sick people would come just to be healed by Jesus. And Luke says, as he healed them, the power of Jesus came upon them. His power, not theirs. Also mentions 7 to 8 times about removing demons from people as a miracle. And I know these days we kind of like, I don't know if that's true. Probably is. We probably need more of it. Talks about him having control of the fish. He did this trick like Aquaman. And when he's getting his disciples, their nets get filled up so much that it tears the nets and sinks the boats because there's so many fish that came to Jesus' command. Another time it talks about him having command of the elements when he commands the sea to stop the storm. He just has command over the weather and it listens to him. Another, as Pastor Jacob talked last week, was, or the first week of this series, was feeding of 5,000 with basically a family meal from Long John Silver's. So if you've missed any of this series, I'd highly encourage you to go back and listen to any of this series. He also talks about Jesus raising people from the dead besides his own resurrection. So that's why everybody's excited to see about Jesus. That's why Luke is convinced that Jesus is who he says he is, the Messiah, the one sent from God. That's why on Palm Sunday, people are throwing a parade for him when he rolls into town. So with all of these miracles, it kind of reminded me of this. But Jesus has the power, and we don't. So back in the 90s, there was this. And I was told not to do this again after the first service because it was so bad, but hey. Anyway, that's what it reminds me of. When you hear of all these miracles over and over and over, that's Jesus. And he would be walking around like that. And if anybody remembers from back in the 1900s, that movie Evan Almighty, it kind of reminds me of what would have been happening. But Jesus was not like that. He was much more humble than us. But he has the power, and we don't. Some people love it. Some people despise it. And what Luke also records is all the different responses to these miracles. Not just the miracles, but how everybody in the crowds respond. There were some people who just wanted more. Hey, that was cool. Feed us some more. That was cool. Heal some more. Give me. Take. Some people, that's all they wanted. Some people were afraid. The power kind of freaked them out. Some people were furious because his miracle caused them not to be in control. And we're that way sometimes too. When he tells us something to do that we know we're not supposed to do and we do it anyway, we get a little furious and mad at him because we want to be in control, not him telling us what to do. Some people were amazed. Some worshiped. Some people were astonished. Some people were disgusted. Some people were thankful. Some people that were healed were very appreciative and grateful. Some people that were healed were ungrateful. They were like, you healed me good, see ya. And we know sometimes that happens for us. We get to where we can't handle something. Last resort, I'm going to God. I'm going to Jesus. Then once things get good, see you, Jesus, I got it again. We all know we've been there. We kind of don't need him like we did when it's something under our control, but and it's out of our control, we got to go to him, but then we forget what he did for us. Responses are all different. Some people will glorify him. Some people become followers of him that truly make them the Lord and Master of their life, obey what he teaches because they believe that that power is transferable to them. Some people wanted to kill him because it took away their power and control. Some people are changed, others are not. Some people receive a power transfer from Jesus, others do not. The conduit of this power transfer, Jesus giving his power to us, is faith. Faith. Throughout Luke, he also records times where Jesus gives the power to the people. Honestly, he healed people, and it said, and the power of Jesus came upon them. And there's a time he sent his 12 disciples out to heal people under his name. He gave them his power. Another time he gave 72 of his followers the authority, his power to go out and heal people and do miracles. There was one guy, we don't even know who he is, who was casting out demons in Jesus' name just because he believed in Jesus' name. That power comes through faith. He wants to transfer his power to us, but it requires faith. So as we look into Luke chapter 8, we're going to start in verse 43, but I want to kind of set up the story of this miracle before we dive into it. Jesus had been in an area called Gerasenes, which is across the sea from Nazareth. It's a non-Jewish area. And there's this guy named the Gadarene demoniac who lives in the tombs that nobody could control. He kept busting out of irons and all that stuff. Jesus goes, removes the spirit, puts the spirit in a herd of pigs, drowns the pigs in the ocean. This guy that was new, got new life. The people in the town were not happy, and they told Jesus to leave. Get out of here, Jesus. We don't want you no more. When you do things like that, you take away control from what we can do. You just ruined my pig farm for the year. What am I going to do? Just go. I'm not going to trust you. I want to trust myself. And so he goes back across the sea to Nazareth. He's in Nazareth, and what happens is what always happens when he's in his area is people come and flock around him. They want to hear him teach. They want to hear him preach. They want to be healed. So a crowd is around Jesus. And while this crowd is around Jesus, this man named Jairus shows up. Jairus is the ruler of the synagogue there in Nazareth. Means he's a big deal. He's got some power. He's got influence and control in the community. It also means he has money. So he's kind of like a big deal. He comes up, falls on the ground in front of Jesus to worship him, says, Jesus, please come to my house. My 12-year-old daughter is dying. So no matter how much influence and power and control we think we have, there will always be a time that we do not have the power and influence and control and need to rely on Jesus. So this guy, the bigwig, shows up in front of everybody, the crowd, and humbles himself, kneels down on the ground before Jesus. Now, here's where our story picks up. In verse 43, as this occurs, it said, and there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Let's not be juvenile about this. She basically was having her period for 12 years. Not once a month for 12 years, but every day for 12 years, which means she was sick. The medical term called menorrhea, but it makes you really sick. You have no energy. You're pale. Your eyes are dark and black. Getting up, walking across the room makes you out of breath. You're alive, but you're not living a life you think is worth living, probably. She's been enduring this for 12 years. But not only was she sick, if we take into context of what was going on at this day and time, being a Jew, she wasn't allowed to go to church. Because if you were around blood, if you touched blood, you were considered unclean. in the Jewish law at that time, which means for 12 years she was not allowed to go to church. The person who had to tell her, no, you cannot come into church, was Jairus, who had just knelt down for Jesus. Not only could she not go to church, you couldn't touch anything, because anything or anybody you touched became unclean, and then they were not allowed to do anything. So if she was married, her husband was like, honey, I can't, it'll ruin our business. I won't be able to make a living. Once this is healed, don't touch me. If she had kids, she could not hug her kids. If she had grandkids, her kids would be like, Granny, I know you want to hug the grandkids, but we can't because they won't be allowed to go to school. They won't be able to go to synagogue. Just wait till this is better. So for 12 years, she was sick as a dog, no energy, isolated, shunned from everybody, ostracized from the community, alone. So this is who this person is that shows up. And though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. So she's sick, isolated, alone, and broke. Not much more can go against her at this point. Death sounds pretty good to her, probably. She had went around chasing people, and man did not have the power to heal her. Money did not have the power to change her situation. She could not be in control. She could not be healed by anyone, any human, any person. So she comes up behind him, Jesus, touches the fringe of his garment, and immediately discharge of blood was ceased. She was immediately healed. You just heard a miracle happen. How do we respond, or should we respond to miracles? Come on now. This lady who had no hope for 12 years, isolated for 12 years, is now healed. But that's what we do often when God does something in our power for us. Nice. Thanks, God. So you do a bigger one. We all do it. But the thing about her, too, said she touched him. Now, she had to be covered up. She had on a robe. She had covered her head in her hoodie because nobody could see her. Because if anybody recognized her, they'd be like, you're unclean. You can't get in here and touch us, because the crowds are crazy. There's everybody touching around Jesus. And if you were unclean, it was your responsibility to not touch anybody, or you were considered doing something illegal, and they could just stone you to death for touching somebody because you were unclean and you knew better. She takes the chance. She puts on the cloak. She hides through the crowd, touches, and she's healed. Now, the Bible does not highlight touch. I did, because we're going to come back to that in a minute. And Jesus said, who was it that touched me? And everybody's like, what are you talking about, Jesus? Nobody touched you. We just all up here to see you and greet you. Nobody touched you. And Peter, who was known for speaking and then thinking, said master, but I like to think of it this way, Jesus. Because, we say Jesus all the time, right? But he was saying it a different way. He was actually addressing him. Jesus. These crowds are surrounding you and pressing in on you. It was everybody who was touching you, is what he was implying. Now, notice the difference here. Jesus said, who touched me? And Peter said, everybody's pressing in on you, which means everybody's brushing up against you. They're touching you this way, but they're not touching you. And there's a difference. Because too often we like to brush up around Jesus. We like to get close to Jesus. We like to come and hear the good music. Sometimes it just makes us feel better for coming to church, but we don't touch him. And there's a difference. There's a difference. Jesus said, somebody touched me. And the difference here is the word touch that Jesus said means to properly attach oneself to. Not just brush up against, not rub against. To properly attach yourself to something is what Jesus was saying here. That was the Greek word that he used. Somebody properly attached themselves to me. You see the difference now? There's a little bit difference between properly attaching yourself to Jesus versus brushing up against Jesus. He said, somebody properly attached himself to me, for I perceived that the power has gone out of me. When you properly attach yourself to Jesus, then you can receive the power of Jesus. Not just brushing up against him, just being in the vicinity. He wants us to touch him, because it's a different thing. Because then we can receive his power that can cause miracles to happen. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, he knew power come out from him, so he knows it was me, so I might as well fess up, right? She came trembling, falling down before him, just like Jairus had did, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed, how she received a miracle. Pay attention to what Jairus did and what this woman did. When they laid down and fell before him amongst the crowd, declared in the presence of all the people. Touching Jesus involves us declaring in front of the people, he's master. We like to think that my thing was Jesus, it's private, we're on our own deal. Now, if you're going to touch him, you're going to make it public and let everybody know about it. Let them know that he's in control and not you. Sometimes these people from the 606, me included, like to be pig-headed. Well, I don't want to do it that way. I want to be in control. Jesus says there's a public declaration that needs to happen, and there's a transfer of power. And he said to her, daughter, love that, because before this, all we know, she was a woman who was really sick, probably wished she was dead, broke and isolated and alone. Now she has a new name and a new identity, daughter. She said, you were a nobody, but now you're mine. We're family. You're good. Your faith, he didn't say, you touching me, you getting in my vicinity, you brushing up against me, did not make you well. Your faith made you well. Go in peace. Faith. Now, we got to talk about that a second. Faith is not a know-so. Faith is what I do. We can know something to be true, but if we don't act on it, it doesn't count. It's not faith. Faith means trust. It means applying what you know, which means if Jesus says something, do it. Jesus says something and you know that, but you don't do it, that is not faith. That's just knowledge. The people who bowed down and got on the ground in front of Jesus, in front of the people, received power because of their faith. He said, go in peace, which I love. Because when we do anything under our own power, how often do we keep peace? A little while. For about a minute. Then there's no peace because something else is going on. Or your power runs out and there's another fire you got to fight. So we start to worry and we start to not sleep and we have anxiety. And all that goes on and there's no peace because I'm doing it my way. He said, just connect to me. It's going to be a lot more peaceful if you do. Faith is how we touch Jesus. Faith is the conduit to Jesus' power. If we want his power, that miraculous power, the things that we can't control, it requires faith, which is by touching him properly, by properly attaching ourselves to him, making him our Lord and Master of our lives. That's when it occurs. Now, there's a lot of people in this crowd going on and seeing this. Who do you identify with? This is what I want us to think about now. Not the miracle, but who are you in the crowd? How do you respond when Jesus does a miracle? There are people that are there socially. They're there just because everybody's there. They're hoping to see a show, maybe to see a miracle. Maybe he'll even do something for them. It's just a place to be. That is also something strong in eastern Kentucky. Skeptical. Some people are going to be skeptical of Jesus. Yeah, I know he's got some pretty strong power and he can do these things we can't explain, but I bet there's something going on. And we try to make excuses of why we don't want to accept Jesus. So we just make excuses in our head and be skeptical about it. Which is another thing about eastern Kentucky. We live in a place where almost everybody believes in God. Almost everybody. Almost everybody believes in Jesus. 90% of the people do not even attend church regularly. Because they know it to be true, but they don't have the faith to do what they know they need to do. It's part of the reason we do what we do is because we want everyone to experience the power of Jesus. We don't want to make excuses. Well, I don't go to church because I worship in the hills, or we got our own thing going, or whatever reason. Are you the changed? Some people become new people because of Jesus. That's what he wants for us. A new name called his sons and daughters. And we become true followers of him. But there's one other group in the crowd. We're disappointed. Have you ever been disappointed in Jesus? Probably. I think we all have at some point, because something out of our control, something we don't have the power to fix, occurs in our life. And we ask Jesus to fix it and tell him how to fix it. And when he doesn't fix it the way we want him to fix it, we become disappointed. Because it's not what I wanted him to do. So we either get mad, walk away. Jesus let that happen. He didn't fix the way I wanted to. I'm not going back. I'm going to do things on my own. It don't make a difference. But remember Jairus at the beginning of this story? He was in the disappointed. He could have done the same thing. He could have quit. He could have walked away. He said, I can't believe I come down here and bow down in front of everybody, in front of Jesus. I'm still disappointed. Because as the woman is healed, this goes on, Jairus' workers come to him and say, leave him alone. Your daughter's dead. Jairus is disappointed. He couldn't fix it. He knew Jesus could, and Jesus didn't fix it. So people from his household said, Jairus, listen, you've already humiliated yourself in front of Jesus. Walk away. There's no point in staying around anymore. Let him be. That's what we do sometimes when we're disappointed. Jesus looks at Jairus. Have faith. Come with me to your house. Jairus did get mad and say, no, you're not coming to my house. You let this happen. He said, okay. And as they're walking, the crowd's following, and they're coming up to his house. Jairus' family starts making fun and ridiculing Jesus. She's dead. You're too late. Why didn't you do something when you had a chance? Jesus said, all right. Peter, James, John, come with me. Jairus, you and your wife, come with me. We are going into the house. Y'all sit out here and hush. He didn't say that, but that's what I can imagine him saying. He goes in. He says, daughter, get up, and takes her hand. She rises from the dead. After Jairus experienced the disappointment in Jesus, he experienced the miraculous of power in Jesus because his faith in Jesus to stick with him, to ride with him through the troubles. And that's us too sometimes. When things aren't going our way and Jesus isn't answering it the way we want, he's saying, have faith. Stick with me. It's going to be okay. it's going to be okay. So, we have two recipients of miracles here. We have a no-name, nobody that nobody wants around. And we got a somebody who's got influence. And they both received a miracle of Jesus because they both touched him through their faith. They both publicly in front of everybody worshiped him. They both received. So it doesn't matter who you are, what's your background, you can touch him. You can touch him. So what about you? Who are you in the crowd? Are you the social? Are you the skeptical? Are you the changed? Or are you the disappointed? With faith, we have unlimited access to free power. Power beyond our control. Because no matter what, how strong we think we are, how controlled we think we are, there's going to be a time that we're not. Maybe it's in this life because death or illness or whatever. Or there's a time that says every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess Jesus is Lord. But that's after you die. And if that's when you do it, too late. Because Jesus came to pay the bill, pay your power bill, for you to spend eternity with God through his death, burial, and resurrection on the cross. And you can touch him by having faith in that and living that. Or you can just say, I know that's there, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Don't wait till it's too late. Because the difference between Jesus' power and human power is ridiculous. But Jesus' power is miraculous power. It comes from God. It's unlimited. He can do what we can't. Human power will always leave us short. It never lasts. It's never enough. We always need more. We're always having to work for it. We're always tired because we need more power. It stresses us out. It causes anxiety and worry and all of this, and there's no rest. What did Jesus tell the woman? Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in what? Peace. Our power does not bring peace. It brings us a hunger and a thirst for more power. Jesus' power brings us contentment, satisfaction, peace, which we all want. So if you're here, you know about Jesus. Now you can say, I don't believe or not, but if you're here, you know about Jesus. If not from today, just from growing up in the past at some point. Question is, who are you in the group? Do you trust his power, have faith in him and touch him? Or are you the social, just wants to brush shoulders and enjoy the moment? Skeptical, making excuses of why you don't want to have faith in him? Are you the changed? Or are you the disappointed? Majority, most crowds were the social. No change. He wants more for us. He wants us to access our power, his power, to live the life on earth that he created for us in peace, to fulfill the purpose he made us for. And the byproduct of that is eternity with him. We can't say, oh, I know who he is, so I'm going to go to heaven. That's not faith. It's just a head knowledge. Faith is when you live it out while you're here on earth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the band to come out. They're going to sing a song. It's a great song. And if you're singing it, really ponder the words and see if you really mean it, if you really believe it's true. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this stage for you to come and pray. To give everybody an opportunity to do what Jairus and the woman did. Kneel in front of public, pray to God, and worship him. And I know some of you, it's going to like, I don't want to do that. You know why? It's a control. I don't want to give up control. That's the point. Jesus wants control. He wants you to learn to trust him, follow him, not worry about what other people think. Trust what he says. So as they play, come and just kneel at this altar and pray to God however you need to. If you're not sure what to pray and you want to know directions, Pastor Jacob and I will be down here. We will be love to pray for you. If you have any questions or just want to know how to pray or we want to help you pray. But take the time now to touch Jesus. Don't wait till it's too late. Don't wait till it's out of your power.